friends! So we've just finished our washcloth and we are ready to move on to our next project. So let's set that aside. In this video we're going to cover another cast on technique, which is called the long tail cast on, and we're going to cover how to count and keep track of your stitches. And we're going to begin our sample scarf. So we're on to our next project here. So to begin, you're going to stretch out a healthy length of yarn. I would say maybe the length of your arm, a little bit longer than the length of your arm. And we're going to start exactly the same way we did before with the slip knot. So let's review the slip knot. So here I have my long tail. This is why it's called the long tail cast on. You have a long lead of yarn and you're going to create your slip knot right on the edge of that. So we're wrapping our yarn around. We pull it up and under through, and I'll flash that graphic there again from the first time we did this. So there's our slip knot, and we place it on our needle there. So there we go, we've created that slip knot. Now that we have our slip knot on our needle, just like we started with our first cast on technique, and we have our two ends, we have our long tail and the thread, the yarn that is attached to our ball of yarn, we are ready to start our long tail cast on. So I want you to start by kind of organizing your two ends, just kind of let them hang together, and we're going to make a little pincher with our dominant hand, with our pointer and our thumb, and we're going to slide that in between the two threads, the two yarns. So a little pincher, slide it in between, and we're going to use those bottom three fingers, your middle finger, your ring finger, and your pinky, to grab the ends of the yarn. So now we have tension with those three fingers on the bottom of the yarn, and we have our little pinchers in between. So we're holding here, and I call this slingshotting. We're going to pull this back. You're just going to turn your hand under, and you're going to pull away from your needle. Make sure you don't let your slip knot slide all the way off of your needle. So I hold it with my hand here, and I hold that first stitch, but I'm going to slingshot back, and now you can see I've tensioned with my bottom three fingers on my dominant hand, and I'm pulling back away from my needle. Okay, so, and I will show you this from a different angle. I'm going to show you this from a forward angle if this angle is not quite working for you. So we're going to slingshot back. You're going to slide your needle under the thumb, over to the index finger, and you're going to pull it through. So we just created a new cast on stitch there. So let me show you one more time. I'm going to show you the whole thing. And don't worry if you need a different angle, I'm going to give it to you. So pointers, pointer and thumb, your little pinchers in between the two threads. Wrap those bottom three fingers around. We're going to hold those stitches onto your needle with your non-dominant pointer finger. Slingshot it back. And you're going to slide the needle under the thumb, go over to that pointer finger, and pull the thread through. I'll do it one more time. So at this point, I'm just keeping my grip on the yarn. I don't need to release it every stitch. So I'm just going to hold this here. So slingshot back, under the thumb, over to the pointer, pull it through. Slingshot back, under the thumb, over to the pointer, bring it through. And notice how I'm sort of giving a little tension tug at the end of each cast on stitch. You don't need to pull it super tight. It doesn't need to be wrenched down, but I just give it a nice little tiny tug to organize those stitches and keep the tension the same on each stitch. So I'm going to take you to the forward facing angle now. Alright, so we have our slip knot on the needle here. We're going to place our pinchers, our pointer finger and our thumb, right underneath of that slip knot. We're going to wrap our so fingers under the slip knot. Wrap those 3 fingers around the bottom of your yarn, and then you're going to pull apart, and you're creating tension with those bottom 3 fingers, and then you're going to pull it back so that you're creating kind of a slingshot there. See it? And then we're going to slide that needle up and under the thumb, and it comes around to this pointer finger, and it pulls that pointer finger string under the thumb string, and we slide it off. So, okay, we just cast on another stitch there. Okay, so let's do it again. Pointer fingers in, pointer and thumb, the pinchers in the middle. Wrap our hand around the yarn there. Separate them out. Pull it back to slingshot. Under the thumb. Over to the pointer. Pull it through. And tighten it down. Okay, and at this point I'm just holding on to this. I'm going to keep my grip there. And we're just pulling back to slingshot, under the thumb, over to the pointer, pull through, and adjust the tension, slingshot, under the thumb, over to the pointer, pull through, slingshot, go. Under the thumb, over the pointer, pull through, slingshot, under the thumb, over the pointer, slingshot, and we're going to continue doing this until we have 20 new stitches cast onto our needle. And as you go along, try to keep even tension along the way, keep those stitches nice and neat and organized. Alright, I'll see you guys when we have 20 stitches cast on. Alright, so now that we have 20 stitches cast on, you might be wondering why we used this cast on as opposed to the wrap around the thumb technique. That might have been easier for you. Each cast on is going to give a slightly different appearance to the work. The stitches are going to lean in a different way. And some cast-ons just look a little more complex, a little more sophisticated than others. So I'm trying to get you used to stepping up and learning new techniques. And even if you do know one cast-on, that's great. There might be one that even looks a little bit fancier and a little bit more sophisticated. Or this long tail cast-on might have been easier for you than the first cast-on that we learned. So there are lots of methods out there. These are only 2 of many different cast-on techniques. As you can see, I still have quite a bit of tail left. That's okay. We're going to work it back in at the end. And it's always better to have a little extra tail left over than to realize that you didn't have enough tail to start with and you need to redo your cast on. So the next thing I'm going to show you guys is how we count our stitches and ensure that we maintain the same number of stitches all the way down the work. So I'm going to show you guys stitch markers. So these come in a very wide variety of shapes, sizes, You know, you can get them with charms on them that dangle and are really cute. But basically the way this works is you slide it onto your needle and you can slide them on at particular points. So let's say we have 20 stitches cast on here. If I want to slide this on halfway through at 10, that way I know I can eyeball and say, okay, there should be 10 stitches on the left and 10 stitches on the right. You know, I could put, you know, 4 every 5 stitches. You know, it just depends. It's up to you. So these are a great way to count your work as you're going without having to start at the very beginning and count all the way to the end. And it creates a little bit more visual ease in keeping track of your stitches. In a moment, I will show you how we actually move them from one needle to the next. Now, if you don't have anything like this, now you can use a safety pin, you can use one of those little charms that you hook on the end of your wine glass. You can really use just about anything. But you can also use a contrasting piece of thread. So if we just do a little knot, we can slide this onto our work and that can become our stitch marker. Whatever you have lying around the house, if this method sounds like it would help you out, go ahead and give it a try. I always hang on to my yarn scraps because I reuse them in ways like this. But let me show you how to knit with the stitch markers. I'm going to pull out 4 and we're going to place them every 5 stitches. Okay, so I make sure I have my tail that's attached to my yarn. And for the first couple of rows, we're just going to get back in the groove of our regular basic knitting stitch. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And I'm just gonna pop that on there. And, oh wait, I said 4 every 5 stitches, so I need to do one more stitch. 5. Okay, so we pop that on there and we keep right on knitting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5 more stitches. Pop that on there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Uh-oh, okay, I have an extra stitch. So either I miscounted when I was casting on, or I miscounted when I was placing my stitch markers. Okay, I miscounted when I was casting on, so I actually have 21 stitches here. So it's much better, especially if you're working with a pattern, not such a big deal with a scarf, something like this. But if I were working with a clothing pattern, now I know that I accidentally cast on an extra stitch before I get like halfway down a sleeve and realize that the sleeve is going to be too big or the pattern's not going to line up. So this is where stitch markers really come in handy, and being able to quickly visualize and count your stitches. So that's a great example. I didn't plan that, but I'm glad that you guys were able to see in live time how this can visually help you out, because I did count my stitches and I thought I had 20 stitches on here, and evidently I had 21 stitches on here. All right, so I'm gonna unravel this and I'm gonna start over. Now, when you're first starting out, it's okay to kind of work through a project that isn't perfect. You know you made a mistake. But once you get into more high-end luxury yarns and you're starting to dedicate more time to your projects, I would say if you recognize a mistake early on in your work, it's always better to just go ahead and fix it right in the moment. Now, when you pull apart a work, as you can see, I'm just literally just pulling it apart and it's popping, and the stitches are popping out. This is called frogging your work. And I'm going to take it all the way down, back down to that slip stitch there. All right, I'm going to recast on. We're going to come back with exactly 20 stitches, not 21 stitches, and then we're going to get into knitting our scarf. All right, I corrected my mistake there, and now I have a stitch marker every 5 stitches, and I have exactly 20 stitches on here. So I want you guys to just practice knitting back and forth with moving your stitch markers from one needle to the other. So we're just going to do a couple rows of basic knit stitching. And I'm going to show you guys how to move these stitches. Let me make sure you're in focus here. Okay. So we're just doing our basic knit stitch just like we did on our washcloth. So I just knit 5 stitches and now I have come to my stitch marker, and all you do is pass it from one needle to the other. So let me show you again. All I do is pass it from one needle to the other. You don't stitch, or you don't need to do anything with the yarn. You're just simply moving it from one needle to the other. Just continue stitching along. There's our next stitch marker. And there we go. That way we can move these all the way up our work with us as we stitch and keep track of how many stitches are on here. And it makes it visually easier to recognize if you have dropped a stitch or picked up a stitch, so that we can make sure that our scarf is even all the way up. We don't have a scarf that grows and gets wider or shrinks and gets smaller, which is a common problem when people knit their very first scarf. Alright, so now I want you guys to just practice for a couple of rows, probably about 10 rows, moving these stitch markers from one needle to the next, and we're going to get a chunk of fabric, I would say about 3 or 4 inches long, and this is just practicing that same knit stitch back and forth that you're already familiar with from your washcloth project, and we'll reconvene after you've gotten adjusted to using the stitch markers. And that is the first part of starting our sample scarf.